Hello and welcome to another edition of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We're we're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. We're also live on Instagram for the first time, so we hope we might see some folks there. Our guests today are Tim Fielder and Walter Greason. They collaborated recently on the graphic history of hip hop, and we'll learn more about that in a few minutes. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the guest host for today's show. I'm also the executive producer for Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. It's always a pleasure to be with you on Sunday mornings, and I should note it's an incredible honor to guest host the show. Folks that have been watching for a while are familiar. I've been doing this for 6 years with Sree, helping to produce the show. But I still remember the first time that he asked me. First of all, I was helping him with comments, etc., putting in links to articles. But I still remember when he was traveling one day and said that, you know what, I still want the show to go on, even though I won't be able to be there. Here's my Facebook password. Log in as me and host the show. And it's just an incredible, for Sree to do that in terms of his social media presence. I'm always honored to sit in the big chair, as we like to call it. Um, please please comment, please share, retweet. Let us know where you're watching from so we can give you a shout out. One of the best parts of we use StreamYard for our production is that we can put comments on the screen and highlight all the folks who are joining us from around the world and often around the country. I want to give a quick shout out to Paula Kiger, who is from Tallahassee, Florida. Paula, thank you so much for joining us. Paula was a longtime producer of the show and is always supportive of all the work that I do and that Sree does. Thank you so much, Paula. Jonathan is joining from a not yet rainy East Coast. I was just seeing this morning how bad the weather is going to be up in the Northeast. So hope everyone stays safe and stays dry. It looked like Long Island was going to get the brunt of it. I might be wrong. Also joining us is our friend Stefan Kaplan, saying hello to the New York Times Read Along family. Stefan is from Ramsey, New Jersey. So we definitely want to thank him for joining us. And again, as a reminder, we're also live on my Instagram page. You can find it at Instagram.com/Neil Parekh, at Neil Parekh on Instagram. This is the first time that we're going live. We're multi-streaming to Instagram as well. It's not in portrait mode, unfortunately. And I heard a rumor it might actually cut off the show after an hour. They're still working out some glitches, but it opens up a whole new world for us. So we're really excited about that. I want to remind folks that our guests are Walter Greason and Tim Fielder, and we'll be talking about their project, The Graphic History of Hip Hop. So please stick around for that. We're definitely looking forward to it. I'll take off Stefan's comment so that you can properly see the graphic. But we're definitely looking forward to that conversation. A couple more shout outs before we move forward. We have Ron Thomas, a former guest on the show, watching from Dubai. Thank you, Ron. Always great to see you. We have Joan watching today from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. See, I do have to keep an eye on the comments and read them through, because sometimes you guys move. You watch from elsewhere, and it's always great to see that. Ken Fisher is watching from Iowa, saying good morning to friends and fiends alike. That's the first time I've heard friends and fiends. I've usually heard friends and enemies and frenemies, but friends and fiends. Interesting. But with that introduction, what I want to do is go ahead and bring on our two guests. before we go do our scan through the paper. So we'll bring them on, do some quick introductions, and then we will dig into the paper and to their graphic novel. Again, it's Tim Fielder and Walter Greason are joining us, and we're thrilled to have them. Let's go ahead and bring them on the show. Tim, Walter, so great to see you.
Hello.
Good to see you, sir.
Glad our mics are working and our videos are working. We've got stable internet connections. We're ready to go. We're ready to go. For folks who don't know, and I want to give a quick shout out, Stefan is watching on Instagram. So I want to thank you, Stefan, for jumping over there just to see what that's like. I know it's a horizontal video in a portrait world, but it's still we'll see what we can get with it. But for folks who don't know you, Walter and Tim, Walter is of course a frequent viewer of the show, contributing in the comments, and is so far now is a 3-time guest on the show. So we're starting to get into some heady territory there. We're going to start keeping track, kind of like Saturday Night Live. But we'll start, Walter, with Tim, if you don't mind, since he's newer to our New York Times read-along family. Tim, can you give folks just a quick introduction in terms of your background and the work that you do?
Yes, I am a visual Afrofuturist and graphic novelist. Brought on board the graphic history of hip hop team to bring a visual narrative to Walter's written narrative. I've been doing visual Afrofuturism for decades, all the way from the age of 12, 13, or 14, somewhere off in there. And I have the pleasure of having worked for many, many years in the industry. First starting out professionally as an editorial cartoonist and then segueing into comic books. And now I find myself in this crazy digital world of mishmash of all mediums, and even doing cartooning of people talking on video, portraiture. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's great, Tim. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Walter, for folks who may be meeting you for the first time, or just as a reminder, give us a little bit about your background.
Good morning. My name is Walter Greason. I'm a professor of history at Macalester College in Minnesota. I've been writing professional history for 20 years, but even longer. Been doing lessons on Afrofuturist design long before the phrase was popular. So I would say most people have known my work on either suburban history or economic history. But most of all, spent about a decade designing the Marvel Studios concept of Wakanda before the Black Panther film became popular. So my 6th book was about how to create Black fictional environments and really world build using more academic tools. And a big part of what that goes into what we're doing with this graphic novel.
That's great. Thank you so much, Walter. Want to give a shout out again to remind people, because this is new, that for the last several years we've been streaming to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our website. And today we're adding Instagram to that. So I want to give a shout out to folks who are watching. I know that Jen Hansen has joined, a high school friend of mine, always supporting the work that I'm doing on Instagram. And then I have a cousin who joined as well. Either it's my cousin Jyoti or Kapil. They have the same account, I believe. But thank you for just checking this out. As folks know, we do this every Sunday. We invite guests to join us. We talk about their work and their career. And then we also review the New York Times and talk about the news of the day. Other folks watching us, we have, and this is for the first time, this is interesting to me. I'm still, as these platforms evolve. So Julia is watching on Twitter, from what I can tell. And that's the first time I've seen a notification from Twitter. in the stream. So Walter and Tim, you're part of some, experimentation here. So you'll hear that in my voice from time to time. And Ron is offering his greetings. Tim, I know that you guys, Walter, I know you guys have interacted before in the past. And I see that Gabrielle has joined on Twitter as well. So this is going to be interesting. We're going to be able to see, we've had a good audience on Twitter. What has been interesting in terms of the way our show has evolved, we get higher numbers on Twitter, more engagement on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And so it looks like we might be actually seeing it's some new functionality where we can see who's actually watching on Twitter. I have, for folks who are interested, to make Instagram Live work, I actually have a split screen going on. I have my Instagram open on the right, and I can see the comments coming in there, and the folks who are watching. Prabodh Sharma is joining us. PK Sharma, a friend of Sri's, as well as Shai Morris, and I'm not sure who Shai Morris is, but thank you everyone for joining us. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, either in Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Instagram. And with Instagram, I'll read out your comment. With the other platforms, I'll be able to put it on the screen directly. But Walter and Tim, thank you for your flexibility and patience. This is just it's a lot of fun. I'll say that for folks who have been watching for years, you might remember in the early days, Sri started this 8 years ago. He literally took out his phone and said, when Facebook Live first became a thing, he's like, let me check this out. He was a professor of what was called new media at the time at Columbia University. And he said, let's experiment with Facebook Live. Let me put a newspaper on the table. Let me aim my camera at it and let's talk about it. And we've certainly evolved since then. But in the early days, even when I joined, we used to do a lot of kind of teaching during the broadcast. We'd explain how Facebook Live worked. We'd explain the different features and functionalities. So we're doing a little bit of that now as well. And I do want to give a couple more shout outs. Stefan is commenting on Instagram saying it's interesting. It's hard to see the comment being typed while live on IG. Interesting, Stefan. And Shai Morris is saying they're having their breakfast while listening to you, listening to us, which is great. I do want to give a shout out. Sri is watching on Instagram. Sri's traveling. That's why I'm in the chair. But it's always great to know that Sri's with us. And Shai is watching from Brooklyn, New York. Again, an Instagram comment. My mom is watching from Tampa, Florida. Hi, Mom. And Walter, I know you know my mom from earlier shows. And Jonathan is saying something. I've noticed something similar in my post. My flamenco posts do better on Instagram, while the flaneur posts do better on Facebook. It's interesting you see that difference. In general, I've seen more engagement, not on the live, but in general with posts. Our analysis, Instagram has more engagement than other platforms. But Doug is watching from Los Angeles. We'll be talking about Doug later because he's going to be our guest January 7th, talking about the Communications Golden Hour, the second edition of his book. And my sister is watching from, saying good morning, watching from Bellevue, Washington. So thank you, Amy, for joining. And Stefan is saying on Instagram, the resolution and screen looks great, even though it's a horizontal video in a vertical world. It still looks good on Instagram. PK Sharma is joining from 30 Lincoln Center. So with all of that and with all the introductions, we have all of our New York Times Read Along family with us. Walter, Tim, what I'm going to do is to go through the newspaper, look at the front page sections, front page of each section, just to give folks a tour of what we will see later in the show. And then we'll come back and talk about the graphic history of hip hop, the graphic novel that you two worked on. And I can't help myself. I want to give people a quick sneak preview of one of the inside pages. And there's Walter holding it up, the hard copy as well, which is always good to do. the graphic novel. There's some inside pages. Here's just a little preview of what we're going to see later in this show. But for now, let's go to the paper and let's give folks a sense of what's to come when we look at the newspaper together. And of course, Walter, Tim, for this section, we're gonna try and keep the commentary to a minimum, unless something really jumps out. But we will get to commentary later in the show. On the front page, there's a big display story behind the scenes at the dismantling of Roe, and a really in-depth look of how that decision came together. The lead articles: Israel didn't act on secret record of Hamas money, and tragedy upon tragedy. The entire situation is horrible, but now we have news that I think it was 3 hostages who were in Gaza were shot and killed by the Israeli military in a friendly fire incident. Tragedy upon tragedy. The below the fold, children facing peril and death in roofing jobs. I saw this online. I think these are recent migrants, probably. I think it was undocumented workers, but children who were working on roofing jobs. Decades of war and still overlooked. A survivor of the strife in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where millions are displaced. Here's a critic's notebook piece about, I think it's about a Charlie Brown Christmas, but the headline, Charlie Brown Christmas, a Hanukkah classic. So I wanted to make sure that this is the original and not some kind of new variation on the classic show. The other article on the front page: people snatchers for Ukraine use harsh tactics to fill ranks. That's your front page section. We will try and spend some time with Puzzle Mania. I don't know, Tim and Walter, if you guys do puzzles. Are you crossword people? Walter's nodding his head. So we'll take a look at this later. This is a once a year Puzzle Mania special section, which is always incredible. We actually had one of the puzzle makers join us last January to talk about his work on that section. Arts and leisure: Disney is a language. Do we still speak it? As the company celebrates its 100th anniversary, its dominance as a generation-spanning cultural force no longer seems certain. And to give you a sense of what the graphic looks like, it shows some Disney characters. Looks like they're marooned on an island in the middle of nowhere.
Now, I did a great article on that a couple of years ago about could Marvel Studios characters overtake Disney's in terms of public recognition. So I'm glad to see the Times joining the conversation.
Oh, wow. Good. We'll want to hear more about that later when we get to the article. Sunday, the opinion section. The story at the top, and I can't remember, Andrea. Anyone remember from last week's show? Andrea told us the term skybox, I think it is, across the top. The campus speech uproar highlights differences in how Black and Jewish students are treated. That's certainly something we might want to take a look at later in the show. The cover story shows a hand looking like they're reaching for some medication because the caption or the subtitle, "We already know how to treat addiction. Effective medications, better funding, support rooted in science. A roadmap for helping the millions of Americans with substance use disorder." And again, this is in the opinion section. Sunday business. So again, these full page images, but you don't know until you turn the fold, look at below the fold, what the story is. Behind the birth of an anti-vaccine story. A 24-year-old's sudden death devastated his family and caught the attention of online activists. Any death is sad, particularly when parents have to bury children. But we'll see what that story is about later. Sunday styles, and you'll notice the paper is a little bit bright. You might come through on the camera. I'm not sure. They use a different paper style. The photographs are nicer in here. That's all because of advertisers. Advertisers want their content to shine better in the style section. So the graphic again, fold this a little bit so you can see what that looks like. The Tricky Arithmetic of Love and Money, a special collection of essays and reader stories about how financial issues can complicate relationships. I would not have guessed that from the graphic. There's people are standing in front of ATMs, but I wouldn't have thought of love and money from this graphic. So that's interesting. There is the book review, Money Talks, Memoirs of the Very Rich is the cover story. And we have the New York Times Magazine. And I want to take a moment. I think that I always like the way they do the layout. This is a series of smaller images with the headline, The Failed Promise of Police Body Cameras. They were supposed to bring about a revolution in accountability. What went wrong? I wouldn't be surprised if Walter and Tim have some thoughts on policing in America and or body cameras. There is so much that we could dig into this week, Walter, Tim. We'll just have to do our best to stay tight with our comments, and because we want to get as many as possible. But those are the stories in this week's paper, and we will get back to that in just a moment. But until then, we will dig into the graphic history of hip hop with Walter Greason and Tim Fielder. We have a couple of comments, and this is perfect timing because our friend Stefan, who's watching on Instagram, shared a comment, hip hop forever. Man, I miss my Roxy days with the Rocksteady crew. Stefan will, if folks are friends with Stefan on social channels, you'll see pictures from his days. What, the 70s, Stefan? Let me know. Early 80s. It's some great stuff. Great stuff. So, Tim, Walter, let's talk about the graphic history of hip hop. This is the cover image. It's a wraparound cover, so you see the front and then the back as well. Explain a little bit about the project. Why did you, feel the need for putting this together, and where are you using it? Who's the audience for this?
So, yeah, when we got started, it was about a year ago, almost exactly. And I had been working with the New York City schools, their Civics for All education project. And that work basically opens the door for us to have a conversation about the 50th anniversary of hip hop, which is celebrated this calendar year, particularly in August 11th. People have marked as the birth date of hip hop due to a party in the Bronx hosted by Kool Herc and his sister. And that event for the city is a huge landmark because the culture has grown around the world. So working with Joe Schmidt, who was in the Civics for All unit for social studies education, he said, would it be possible to do a graphic novel about the history of hip hop? And of course, I've been teaching courses on hip hop since 1994, been listening, studying, immersing myself in that culture basically my entire life. And I was like, I knew Tim and knew the quality of the work he was doing. I was like, yeah, I think I have somebody who could pull it off. And so reached out. Tim was immediately responsive. I was very thankful. He was very interested right off the bat. And so by January, we were under contract. We started drafting the script. That was done by March. And then about 4 months later, all the art was done. A couple more rounds of edits with the school district. And so it's gone out. 100,000 copies have gone out across the city of New York to all the schools in the city to make this part of not just their 11th grade social studies curriculum, but really it works all the way back down into the elementary schools as well. And there's enormous demand from adults across the city. So we're actually coming out with an expanded edition of it as well that'll be available not just in the schools, but around the world. So it's just been an amazing journey in a very short period of time.
And you have you have different versions out there, right? You have a free version, and we have a PDF of of that on our website. I'll put the link in the on a ticker in just a moment. But you have a free version that's being used in schools, and you have other versions that you're planning, right? Tim, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I've driven my colleague crazy and insane because I'm trying to get it right. And what we wanted to do, because Walter is a historian, and you know, as a visual artist who works with a historian, it's all about the granular detail. They can deliver a fact, right? That fact has layers and layers and layers of complexity. And because this has now turned out to be clearly the biggest project of my career thus far, meaning if by default 100,000 copies, that's what that is. What it has done in the expanded version is all the things that we couldn't fit in this volume one, we can now have an expanded volume one that will go into even deeper detail with the more socio-political, the geopolitical elements, but also of those little small things that we would have loved to have gotten in there that we can make big now and expand on them with farther graphics, even more dynamic graphics, and really pushing the envelope. And that'll be uploaded and done very shortly.
That's great. That is just incredible. Um, Tell us, I know I keep this this graphic front and center for us because it's just great to see. Sorry about the moving around. Um, Talk a little bit about the response that you've gotten in the schools. This is a lot of it. The way that I understood it, and kind of when I looked through it really quickly, you're trying to put this put hip hop into historical context, right? This is, you know, I mean, people who come to the music, the culture now, um, might might not have the background. um, what's the biggest surprise that people are getting once they see the context that you're putting it in?
So no, you got to tell the story. You got to tell the story about the middle school kids. Go for that first.
So, you know, in one sense, I feel it's weird because we're at the school. This is during the lunch week, you know, and we're riding around the city of New York. You know, the first day we're with teachers in a professional development, probably the first professional development done with an official hip hop publication. I don't even know what we would call it. But then the next few days we're with students, and we are at one school in Hollis, Queens, and you know, we say we're going to sign the books, and you just get swarmed by like 40 kids all at once. And that is both terrifying and exhilarating because you begin to understand that it's like, look, I think I'm very good at what I do, but you know, when I'm doing my work with my books, there's generally a very good reaction. The parents and teachers and stuff, there's a very good reaction to it. This thing, though, it's the most dynamic aspect of world culture, for better or worse, that exists at this time. Hip hop culture is world culture. And when these kids are seeing Walter and I do what we do, we present. So while Walter's giving his breakdown of what's going on, I'm literally drawing behind him as a case in point. So, for example, I'm literally when you are doing your thing, I'm literally drawing you, and I'm responding to everything you're saying on the screen. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So it's live reportage, but with this graphic novel, it's more. I'm sorry, I'm gonna finish in 10 seconds. This is one of the greatest things that has ever been done for world culture. And it is my honor to be involved with it. But I got to do it right. It has to be done right because people are going to be judging us 10 years from now. And I'm so grateful to do this. And I just want to show the beauty of the form, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
That's what it's about, because it's about a high level of scholarship that this man has put into this project. He put his name on it. You know what I mean? And I I'm just gonna make him look good. That's just the way I should look at it. I'm gonna make him look good.
Well, it's great to see that kind of partnership. I do want to point out to folks that this is
Uh-oh.
Should we keep talking here?
I'm not sure if we dropped the signal. So
I don't know if we dropped the signal. So, but yeah, I guess I'll say if people can still see us, I guess I'll talk, or we'll see. But yeah, it's one of those interesting things where Walter, when you are breaking down stories, it's
I'd be having some issues with my feed. There we go. I'm back.
okay. Hey,
Sorry about that.
All right. We were trying to keep the story going. Oh, is he there?
I've got some technical issues here, but you can
Okay.
hear me, right?
Yeah,
can hear
Tim and Walter,
Yeah.
great. What I was going to say, I'm going to come back into the studio. And there we go. So let's take care of this.
sometimes you got to have backups ready in place and be able to jump in wherever you need to. That was me going to my laptop for just a moment. What I want to do is to put this show in context. Back in August, we had a special show with Adrienne Green. I don't know if you caught that one, Walter.
I did.
You did. Adrienne works at the New York Times Magazine as the deputy editor of special projects. They did a special magazine issue on hip hop at 50, which was great. The other way that this show connects with the work that we're doing, we've worked with Hip Hop Public Health. We had Dr. G.A. Williams on the show. This is going back 2 years. They've used hip hop to share public health messages. Again, with a similar audience in mind, with young people, and Sri we worked closely with them for about a year. Sri was on board meetings with Dougie Fresh and Ashanti and several other luminaries. Just incredible. And in January, for MLK Day, I want to let folks know that we're going to have Ernie Suggs from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on our show. It's going to be a AJC read along. We occasionally do other newspapers, but Ernie was a guest on our show about a year ago, year and a half maybe. And this time he's going to be focusing on a documentary that AJC put together. The South Got Something to Say, so that's going to focus on hip hop's evolution and the Southern kind of, I don't call it branch, but really groups that came out of the South and really trying to assert themselves and put themselves on the stage. I think it is. Great in terms of looking at your in terms of the hip hop graphic history of hip hop that you actually did include several regions in your work. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the pages inside. I love being able to show full PDFs of whether we're doing a special from the New York Times or a book like this, because you can really see the style, the mix, some historical context rather, the written word from Walter, but you can see Tim's graphic work, which is just great. I showed a small preview earlier. And this really, it does give that sense that history that hip hop came from going back to Reagan and Stevie Wonder, addiction, poverty, violence, back the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the time
Yes.
frame you're looking at?
That's the piece. Like, I think really folks don't appreciate how culture evolves over time. And so that's been my field of study now for 25 years. And a lot of people want to say things are very spontaneous. I think of various actors who break through after generation, like a decade or more of trying to struggle and get into the limelight. This is a very true for all of our lives, is that whatever we see, people talk about Joe Biden as president and his struggle to kind of break through, and the moment in '08 when he comes vice president. These things take years and years and years. And so there can be eruptions, there can be moments that are flashpoints. But what we try to capture in the book is the fact that it's all connected. And so that's one of the main pieces historians are essential for, is to keep things in perspective and help people see where everything's come from, but also what's possible going forward, what kinds of paths we can choose so that we can find the best options for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren.
And I want to give a quick shout out to some folks who are watching on Instagram, in particular, Jeannie Newman, my always my teacher, but going back to high school. Jeannie, thank you for joining us and just checking out what we're doing. This is the first time, as I mentioned earlier, that we are live on Instagram as well, in addition to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. Miriam is watching from Hell's Kitchen in New York, so I want to give a shout out to Miriam. And Howard Kushlin is joining on Twitter and checking in for a little bit. Wanted to say hi, and again, I think we said earlier hi to Doug Levy, who is watching from Los Angeles. So I just want to remind folks that Doug will be joining us January 7th on the New York Times Read Along. So getting back to the book itself and the novel, some just to go through some more of the pages and some more of the work. Tim, tell us a little bit about your process working with Walter. Was it a one way? Walter wrote everything out, and you're like, okay, I got to figure out how to make this shine in terms of imagery, or were you also kind of contributing to what the story would look like, what the panels would look like?
Yeah, I would think that our editor would love for it to have been more, but that didn't happen. This was a back and forth. Walter gave me a script. I broke that script down into and thank you for asking this question, because I've never really gone this much into detail with it. It's like once I had the script, I had to break down his points into pages, and I think Walter, we could agree the script and even the way we did the visuals, nothing was sacred. We deviated, we took detours, we went everywhere.
No, the whole thing, we had to be dynamic in the process in order to make it as compelling as it is, as energetic as it is.
Exactly. Because it was like they're just things you miss when you're working. Oh, I'm doing this image of. I was telling. We just got interviewed by a Publishers Weekly the other day, and we were talking with the great Calvin Reed, and we were. As I would just mention this quick story as we were talking. Calvin's brother is Chris Reed from Kid and Play. And just how he became part of it. He was kind of suggested, but then he became more prominent as a visual in the story. But that kept building, and then we had to put Heavy D in there, right? So it's those kinds of details that as you build on the story, right? Because the one thing that was absolutely set from the beginning and didn't really deviate was the geopolitical element of the story. Walter was very clear on that from the beginning. You see it when you were mentioning about the points of the violence, Pan-African liberation. That stuff didn't change much. So I was so grateful for that, because if he had asked me to do a deep dive on that, it would have really gone off the cliff for myself. So I could follow what Walter was doing and really add that visual. But when it came to the hip hop part and how it interweaves between all those social things, and you're not just trying to tell where it takes place on the timeline, which is a very important part, but you're trying to also show how it correlates with what was happening politically at the time. And that's what, how we represented women, the map section. It's like Walter wrote that down, but okay, how do you show that hip hop is in New York, Atlanta, Houston, Chicago? Well, man, let me do this with maps, because we're trying to provide a visual narrative to the written narrative, but it's about that dance in between both. So
And there you see those cities
exactly
that you picked out. I'm trying to figure out with New York, what section of the city did you highlight there?
Well, it's very interesting when you're trying to grab maps off your phone to use. I think it's been a while because I'm actually looking here. I think that may have been the base of New York, but I could be wrong about that. But my thing was to try to get a representation of the title as well as the land geographically. So it was a bit of a tremendous amounts of trial and error, tremendous amounts of recapturing history. For example, that Public Enemy image. Mm-hmm. That image was done in 1990. But it was done in black and white for the Village Voice, but it was never published. So part of working with Walter is about recapturing old history.
Wow.
And then making it new. For example, the image with Queen Latifah. That image was done in 1990, 89, right? So here's a section in the script where it's talking about Queen Latifah. Okay, but that one was published in the Village Voice, but it was done in black and white. So nice. Here I can take history. When we say the graphic history of hip hop, we're literally doing is creating new history, but recovering older history. That's probably what it, but you get my point.
This is when we get into the regional look at hip hop. Just a great section here. And again, I want to clarify for folks that we're looking at the free version of the novel, of the graphic novel, and it's available on our website. There's a ticker running across the bottom. If you go to digimentors.group/NYTReadalong and look for the show with Walter and Tim, if you click through, you'll find the PDF. There is an expanded version that you have, and you have other iterations that you're planning over the next several years. But here's a panel or two panels, I guess, looking at the West in terms of hip hop, with, of course, MC Hammer, Death Row and Aftermath Records, Tupac over here as well.
Yeah, so this particular piece was really important. So, Tim and I are both kind of New York folks. He lives up in Harlem. I'm from out in the suburbs of Jersey. And so this piece about including the different regions and how it evolved was really important to me. It's a broad layer of historicizing the content, because most of the early coverage was very New York oriented for more than a decade. And you get this moment in the late 80s and early 90s with NWA where things start to break through and you start to see a different vision of how hip hop is unfolding in San Francisco and Los Angeles. But then the transformation is when we come from the West, then you start to see it grow in the Midwest and, of course, the South, this moment that you're talking about with Ernie Suggs, and you get the win for Outkast at the Grammys, where the South becomes kind of the loudest voice. Like you see the South grow and then move into the media stage. And so, this is why we have Missy Elliott up front. She's essential. It's the reason why she's one of the first Black women to go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, is that this piece not only do we represent the artists and the kind of music that they present and the feelings that they inspire, but we're also capturing the movement of how hip hop changed different places at different times in the correct sequence. Like, how did it actually emerge and start to become a national and international force? And so that's one of the pieces that I love throughout the entire. And I tend to call it a graphic history, because we get into trouble with the folks who are most comics tend to be about fantastic environments or fantasy stories. This is all factual. Like, this is all true.
Sure.
And so the heart of it is that it's a history that is based in reading and interpreting the past that we shared, and in a way change the way the world sees itself. And so that's the biggest piece for me, is capturing the window from 1973 to 2005, and then framing not just it as a human experience, but also the way it changes our landscape, our spatial awareness, who we are, where we are, and the way that dynamic interplay continues to evolve.
Tell us a little bit about this last panel. I mean, we scrolled through. You mentioned the South, and we talked about the West. This last panel is the world. The message everywhere to everyone was unmistakable. All I need is one mic. Nas and Jay-Z. Talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, so Def Jam Records is at the heart of the culture in terms of as it becomes an industry. And so one of the key moments is when there's a battle where Jay-Z is asserting in the takeover that he is the greatest MC in New York, the greatest MC in hip hop. And it's at a moment when Nas's mother dies, and he's away from doing recording, and he comes back and releases a song called Ether on Jay-Z's birthday. And this song there's a battle rap tradition in hip hop, but Ether is recognized around the world as the track where, like, the culture shifted, where Nas established that he is the best lyricist, the most creative artist in the field. And so there's a tension between Jay-Z and Nas that persists to this day. We could post this on any of the media today and be like, who's the better lyricist, Nas or Jay-Z? And the rest of the show would be taken up. Like, all the comments from everybody else would just take over.
Fighting words.
So to have them together for us was this moment of showing the way generations came together. If you look in the shadows of the image, you'll see family members in the background that Tim layered in. You'll see this notion at the top of the world, the 50th anniversary being recognized. But it's the way that Jay-Z is out in a spot like the NFL. And if you'll notice, in the last few years, NFL has moved towards embracing hip hop much more aggressively in the way it shapes its content delivery. That's all Jay-Z. Like, if you don't get Rihanna at the Super Bowl, you don't get Death Row Records, Aftermath Records at the Super Bowl without Jay-Z. And so Nas, on the other hand, has emerged, especially this year. People are calling him the president of hip hop, that he is essentially the voice of the culture. And going from place to place, it's miraculous. He built a fund for veteran hip hop artists that they, in retirement, will be recognized as grandmasters, and they'll receive a kind of a lifetime payment, and they'll also receive health care. And so hip hop is transforming right before our eyes. And these two, I can't even say young men, these men have dedicated themselves to making it something that lays a foundation for a better world going forward.
Wow. I want to bring in a comment. Dr. Tachi is watching from Fort Lauderdale. Dr. Tachi is another a friend of the show, a regular viewer, and Walter was giving her a quick hello because I know they've connected as well. It is really a family, that a community that we've built up, and I want to give a shout out to Sri for the work he's done to do that. What are we seeing from Tim? Hold that back up again. What do we got here?
I'm sorry. I'm doing visual comedy. That's why I'm not talking a lot. I'm drawing while you talk. Keep talking. Man.
Absolutely. No, I was gonna, before we move to the paper, I was gonna ask you to see what you were doing and give an update.
Just ask me whenever. Go for it.
What do you got? Tell us what you got. That was the one on Walter.
Oh yeah. Well, that's right. I didn't show that to you. Right. So I did one of the I think I showed you before. This one, maybe. This is, hold on, let me see the screen. Sorry about the screen there. The screen is acting
There we go.
weird. That's you.
I see that.
Right? So now that's coming in. Then we do tragedy. We give the
Yeah.
thing, Puzzle Mania special section, the Mouse House, the medical, and money and love, which is interesting to me.
That's awesome. And that's Dr. Tachi. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Even before I saw the comment, that's what I was thinking. So well done with that. I want to give a shout out. Kalpana Sharma is watching on Twitter as well. So thank you, Kalpana. And then on Instagram, again, because this is new, the first time that we're going live on Instagram, we're on my Instagram channel. I want to give a shout out to James Sims, friend of ours from Wesleyan University, where I went to school. He works in communications there. And we had a chance to visit back in November when I was on campus. And so, James, thank you very much. And thank you for the support of our alumni association. I did a show last week, and they watched and commented. So thank you for that. James, I still need to follow up with you. I'm hoping we might be able to get President Michael Roth on the show at some point. Obviously, he's been doing some huge media hits around, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the news, the turmoil on campus with in the aftermath of the Gaza, Hamas, Israel war that's going on. But, we had the presidents of the universities of MIT, UPenn, and Harvard testify last week, and really opened up these debates about free speech on campus. And Wesleyan's president has been on all over the media talking about this and talking about the importance of creating a safe environment for folks, which I think is really important. So thank you, James, for watching. Naomi Service is watching back from her morning dog walk. Great topic. She's enjoying what we're talking about. We are going to be moving into the newspaper fairly soon, but if you did join us late, want to remind you that you can, when the show is over, you can go back to the very beginning and watch the recording on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and our Digimentor's website just a few minutes after the show is over. So you can go back and see this great discussion we had on the graphic history of hip hop. We also, and it was, my mom was clarifying, it's Jyoti Shah. Jyoti is my cousin, is watching from India. So thank you, Jyoti. Appreciate that. With that, let's go ahead and look at the newspaper and switch gears a little bit. So I'll step over, and Tim, you keep doing what you're doing. But when you do have something, if you do have something to show us, pipe up a little bit, or I'll ask you in the middle. We certainly want to check in before the show is over. So again, we have been talking with Walter Greason and Tim Fielder. The graphic history of hip hop is available on our website. If you go to digimentors.group/NYTReadalong, you can find it there. But let's go ahead and do our weekly look at the news. And Tim and Walter, as you know, if there's an article that I pass over, feel free to stop me. Let me know if you have commentary, something you want to add. We looked at the front page earlier. I think and we'll see when we go through the paper, but this behind the scenes at the dismantling of Roe, rejecting a compromise and leaping guardrails to end a long established right. And what's interesting is that the way they did the layout, they have little call out boxes for each of the justices. Samuel Alito wanted to move quickly and hear the case a term earlier. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, made a last-ditch attempt at compromise. Elena Kagan wanted a joint dissent read aloud, but was turned down. Judge Sonia Sotomayor sent a lament to colleagues as Roe began to fall. Amy Coney Barrett favored hearing the case, then changed her mind. Stephen Breyer considered eroding Roe in order to save it. That's interesting. Neil Gorsuch signed off on a 98-page draft opinion in 10 minutes. Can't imagine that he's that much of a speed reader. Clarence Thomas had to be hospitalized in the last lap of the case. So that is interesting. And Brett Kavanaugh was courted for a game-changing vote. So the behind-the-scenes look at the fall of Roe v. Wade. Let's take a look at the rest of that front page section. The Inside the Times is my favorite section. I kind of think of this show as a look inside the Times, particularly when we get insights from Times authors and editors. This story, a photographer's long-term assignment with Talak Hotshots firefighters, included downtime between flames and fire, finding camaraderie. On the right-hand side, they have this whole section has been redesigned. It's been a year now. I'd be curious to check in with our friend Megan DeTrolio, who was on the show last December. She redesigned page 2 and page 3. And so we went over that in detail. I'd be curious to see how things look a year later. They have this new section called the Dateline, where Times journalists are reporting from around the world, an attempt to really showcase that the Times is not just a New York-based paper, but it has a full international component as well. Beverly Hills, California. I'm may not be pronouncing this, Abidjan, and it's interesting that they call it Ivory Coast, whereas I've seen it listed elsewhere as Côte d'Ivory. But here in the paper in the New York Times, it listed as Ivory Coast. Walter, just check me on that. How is my pronunciation on the city?
Côte d'Ivoire.
Côte d'Ivoire on the country, but what about the city itself?
I'm not seeing. Oh, the Ivory Coast as a city. That's probably just standard
the
like
capital.
English.
Abidjan.
Abidjan.
Abidjan. That's what I was thinking. Helsinki, Finland, and Sasebo, Japan. So that was interesting. And then in the spirit of the service journalism that the Times has been doing, they have this little call-out box at the bottom, how to get the most out of your nap, and time it right, keep expectations low, get comfortable, keep it short and set an alarm, rise right, and if you can't nap, take a pause. Tim, Walter, are you fans of naps? Do you work those into your day or no? Do you ever?
I am a fan of naps. I am a huge fan of naps. However, we don't get along very well.
Oh.
Here's an interesting story on the international section. I'm going to have to take a look at this later. Raising a dream baby, ? India has an app for that. Startups add modern tools to maternal traditions. The picture, the caption on the picture, a little dark on your end. A yoga class run by the maker of an app called Dream Child in Surat, India. Pregnancy apps that blend ancient ways with scientific advice have taken off. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a look at that later. I'll reserve judgment. I will admit that historically, I've been very skeptical about New York Times coverage of not so much the politics in India. I mean, that's a whole different story. But some of these kind of looks at culture or life in India tend toward the Orientalist and exotic. Look at what these people are doing. It's still, you'll still get the women still wash their clothes, beating them against rocks type stories. So I will reserve judgment and look at this later. But that's just a something
That's
that I
a really
remember.
important point broadly. That generally the way Americans look at other parts of the world, I'd say China and India are two really great examples. The unfamiliarity that we reinforce is really difficult. And so, there's a couple pieces even relating back to the initial headlines on the front page that I think learning how to read through the Times and look behind the words and kind of see the editorial practices, like what you did with this article right here. I think that's just a really great skill for everybody, no matter what media you're taking in. Don't just see what's being offered. Look behind kind of the thought of why it's put together the way it is, and what are some of the assumptions that the creators are making.
Some great advice from Walter right there, and I appreciate the comment on that. I want to bring in Mary Curtis, who's watching from North Carolina. Had to be here for this conversation, so thank you. Mary is also a former guest on the show, and I was going to make a point. We're still live on Instagram. There's a chance that the Instagram feed might cut off. I got a warning that for some reason, for some shows, they're cutting off at an hour. So in case we lose you, look for us on, we'll continue on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. We have Scoutmaster11 has joined on Instagram, as well as Shine NGO from Hyderabad. So if you do lose the feed on Instagram, please look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube on Sri's channels. You can also go to our Digimentors website, look for the NYT Read Along, and click through to find this story, this event. My mom says thanks for the nice show about the graphic history of hip hop. We covered the graphic history, and now we're moving it to New York Times. Carla Fisk joined on Twitter. Kate joined on Twitter as well. So there's some great folks watching. Angie Wong is watching on Twitter. Sean Herbert. And then we also have Diana Rahini watching on Facebook, saying hello from the San Francisco Bay. And again, I want to note that it is 6:30 in the morning in San Francisco. We love our West Coast viewers joining us. So thank you for that. So we'll continue with the paper. And my mom was just putting in a little bit of context. India has, many states and rural areas. Each has a different culture and tradition. So you do have that. There's a nuance there that you may not always get in the paper. So flipping through, and in addition to the news articles, this is about Ukraine. We also like paying attention to the ads. This one, hatred of Israel is endangering American Jews. This is from the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. So that is an important message that is getting out. We have seen a rise in anti-Semitism over
on
the
that
last
particular point, especially as we're going to the Israel's got secret Hamas ledgers.
Yes.
I think there's a huge opportunity we have, not just as Americans, but as people, to move away from extremes right now. Particularly, I would say on the right wing, like a lot of the violence that is coming out in different places, whether it's school shooters, whether it's the way we're seeing women being persecuted by American courts, moving back towards the middle and finding common ground where there's broad agreement. I think that's the challenge for 2024. And so there's this piece about anti-Semitism. The kinds of things I work on are a lot of anti-Black racism questions that shape the whole debate around the Harvard and the MIT and the Penn presidents.
Yep.
This is the time for us to come back towards each other and find a way to build together. And the people who refuse, those are the folks that we have to keep an eye on and kind of step back from.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to get to that opinion piece later in Sunday Opinion to get some more commentary. But this is the story that Walter was just referencing. Israel got secret Hamas ledgers, but didn't halt the flow of funds over several years. And this is a deep dive going back several years in terms of the work that Israel did to uncover this flow of funds from Qatar, if I'm not mistaken. But this 2-page spread looking back at 2015, 2016, 2018, Turkey was involved as well. And of course, a lot of that money was used in the attacks on October 7th.
Neil, do you see Tim? Tim's got the article.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Tim,
You would look like you were deep into it, man.
Please.
All right, so here's the it's so interesting. This is why I love Walter, because Walter is a statesman. He's a statesman and a diplomat, really is. But he's dealing with this very radical modalities, and it's tough. It's tough to be able to balance that. Anyway, both of you guys got.
What do you got?
So here we go. He's like, "What is he talking about?" He's flattering her. So here's how we got so we had our image of Walter when he was talking first. I drew you earlier. We had the New York Times read along. I had to get the little thing, did the graphic. Then we talk about Japan, how to get the best out of that. Dream Baby Child, all those type of things. And speed. Ukraine, I misspelled Ukraine, but I fixed it, moved them towards the middle. And there we go.
Nice. That's nice.
So
Just a live drawing from Tim Fielder.
And I will be sending these things to you guys so you can use them however you want to use them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim. This is great. This is a nice added element to our show that we haven't had before. Want to give a shout out to Ron Thomas, who switched over to Instagram to see what it looks like there. And he just put in the comment, amazing, talking about that work, Tim. So
thank you.
You're developing fans as we go. Definitely encourage folks to connect with Tim on social media. We'll make it so you can see everyone. Tim is an illustrator, concept designer, cartoonist, and animator. Diesel Funk Studios is where he works from. You can follow him at Diesel Funk, or go to his website on Twitter and Instagram and go to dieselfunk.com to learn more. dieselfunk.com. So definitely check that out. Let's go ahead and see what else we have in the paper. And Walter, appreciate you flagging that Tim had something to say just a moment ago. This story on the right, Israel says hostages held white flag before being killed by troops, which is again tragedy upon tragedy. There's a Vatican fraud scandal, ends in prison term for once powerful cardinal. You don't see that very often. Nicaragua sees a threat behind a beauty pageant. Nicaragua began a crackdown after Shanice Palacios won the Miss Universe pageant last month. And then this is an international article about the Congo, about Congo and Congo residents suffer and Rwanda medals. And then this national section on Texas border, ancient art of healing enters modern age. And there's a little explainer at the bottom why we're here in Edinburgh, Texas. And I'm going to flip this up so you can see, if you can get that map of Texas at the bottom, there at the very south, we're exploring how America defines itself one place at a time. In the Rio Grande Valley, which straddles the Mexican border in Texas, cities like Edinburgh are steeped in old Mexican-American traditions. I like those kind of explainers. It gives a really good context. And again, it's really easy to read for someone flipping through, which is how most people read the paper. They'll flip through and see one or two articles they want to dive into. But the tendency is to read the headline, captions, any kind of pull-out quotes, and then move on. So more of that, please. More of that, please. Here's the story on the Supreme Court, which really almost could have been a separate section, the way they've laid it out. This really nice graphic on the top, and then this layout inside with a timeline across the top, the path to a decision. And I'm going to show the bottom half as well, because they use these kind of half portraits, almost three-quarter portraits of the justices, to show kind of what they were thinking. And I have to assume that there's going to be more on the next page to show the rest of the bench. Not all of it. So they only showed Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Thomas, and Amy Coney Barrett. So the majority, I'm guessing, Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts at the bottom of the page over there. But definitely, if anyone's interested in Roe v. Wade and what happened with it being overturned, you definitely want to check that out.
Yeah, Neil, can I jump in for
Please.
just a minute with this? So the Supreme Court has become this battleground, right? Like where people are seeing it extraordinarily politicized. I mean, ProPublica has done expose after the ways that people have tried to influence justices. And there are folks who are in favor of the current makeup of the court who look back at particularly like the Brown decision right up through Roe. And they were like, well, it used to be too liberal, and this was necessary as a corrective for mistakes that were made generations ago. And they don't see the court as organically evolving. It's very similar to the philosophy that really starts with the John Birch folks about originalism in the Constitution. And that piece about saying that the nation as conceived in the late 18th century can only evolve in very small degrees, if at all, that's a ridiculously dangerous place. I mean, the three of us here in this conversation would not be part of that original compact. And so this way of looking at the control of the court and broadly social control generally in the society, that's the piece I think we can have the conversation of as we enter a presidential election year, is how do we come to a place where we respect and trust each other enough to allow for change over time and to believe that we can find rational solutions for our biggest problems. We can't really go back to a place where dissent and disagreement and the ways that people enter the conversation are eliminated just by nature of their appearance. And that's really what's happened with both the Dobbs decision and with the recent elimination of affirmative action. We're reinstating different varieties of Jim Crow in the pursuit of a Christian nationalist vision of social control. And that's the worst decision we can make. It leads to the kinds of conflict that we're seeing in Gaza. And it would be much larger. It would be regional, if not international. And so I think the majority of Americans, the majority of human beings don't want to create a system that leads to widespread conflict and violence and death. But we have to be very specific in standing up. I just saw a comment online from Eddie Glaude, who is a prominent commentator and professor, talking about the need to stand up forcefully for peace and dialogue and open discourse where we find common solutions together. And that's what the behind the scenes at Dismantling Roe, that's an opposition. That's shadowy back cabinet dealings and attempting to manipulate fundamental institutions to reach really restrictive ends. So no, it's so important that the Times engage this conversation. And I'm eager to hear from everybody who's participating in the presentation this morning.
Absolutely. We have a couple people who are watching. Yeah, Tim, jump in.
I just wanted to say that's one of the things I think that's fascinating about this whole thing. It's like, while these things are happening politically, they're happening in our social environment, just the idea of as Walter is talking about what's happening, I was thinking about Alex Garland, the trailer for his new film Civil War came out just this week. And the importance of the arts towards decoding and digesting potentialities. And I think that's a very fascinating, because the Times, I mean, this podcast is that. It's actually taking those things. It's when you're putting the paper, you're flipping through, you're giving people who can't maybe necessarily read the Times, break it down, but you're providing a visual context for them to do so. It's just an interesting time, because on one end, you have this very conservative type of force, but then you have the arts are more powerful than they've ever been in terms of digesting and decoding that material. And I think I actually, even though on one end I'm like, man, that movie Civil War looks really depressing, but I'm going to go see it. But on the other hand, it's like, I think we got a shot.
I want to bring in a couple of comments from folks who are watching, and we'll go back to the paper in just a moment. Earlier, Diana had given you a wow, Tim, incredible when we showed your work on screen. We'll certainly do that again in a little bit. Darnice is watching on LinkedIn, saying hello from Beverly Hills. Thank you. Miriam says that the book looks like essential reading for anyone interested in American cultural history, which I think is great. And we want to make sure that folks understand what we're talking about. In case you joined us late, we want to bring back up the graphic history of hip hop. This is the cover. This is what we were talking about earlier in the show with Tim and Walter. And you can find that on our website if you go to digimentors.group/New York Times Read Along, NYT Read Along. You'll find a PDF of the graphic history of hip hop. Certainly encourage you to check that out. Tim.
Oh, I think he was drawing. That was me.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
just
no,
waving.
I'm
No worries.
almost done with the next image. Just keep going. Keep talking.
Yeah,
Keep talking.
I just wanted to.
Man, I'm in the zone. Keep going.
I just wanted to push the audience a little bit towards the website we put up about a month ago is graphichistoryofhiphop.com. You can actually request the expanded edition there and put in kind of the pre-order demand that you said, I want copies. And so folks around the world have already been putting in saying they want 2 copies, 5 copies, 10 copies, talking with folks in school districts around the country to produce specific variants just for them. But New York City has already put us under contract for 2 new editions of the graphic history that'll come out in 2024. And so my scripts are basically in place. I'm waiting till Tim gets ready in the new year. He's got an amazing project he's doing with Carnegie Hall right now. And so as soon as Tim gives me the word, the next 2 editions of the graphic history of hip hop will go into production sometime probably February of 2024. And I'll give a sneak peek just for the show about what goes into volume 2 and volume 3. Volume 2 is all about contemporary hip hop. So the last 15, 16 years of hip hop. So Nicki Minaj, you're going to see a lot about Megan Thee Stallion. You're going to see a lot about Cardi B. You're going to see a lot about Drake. But we're also talking about not just the commercial evolution of hip hop, but we're also going to engage with kind of the aesthetic and cultural evolution of hip hop in the last 15 years and how it continues to impact youth culture. And then volume 3 is going to be my big bite, my big shot at putting it all together. I'm looking at music history. So world music history going back 5,000 years. And where does hip hop fit in the context of what we experience as music as a species? And so that's going to be my big shot to say kind of how do we look at hip hop beyond the constraints of its origins? How do we see it as part of the human experience? And so I'm really excited to be able to put that out and give a little teaser for folks who are looking for the content. It ought to be out like October, November of 2024. Nice.
And I'll point out that we do have a link to your website as well on our show page. So if you go to our page, digimentors.group/NYT Read Along, look for Walter and Tim. You'll find not just the PDF of the graphic history, but also a link to their website. Whereas Walter said you can order copies and keep up with the great work that they're doing. Let's go ahead and go back to the paper. We were talking about the Supreme Court. And there are a couple other stories I know we want to get to before we close. It's 9:50 now almost. So hopefully we do try and wrap up at 10 o'clock. We may have to push just a little bit. But before we move on, I do want to make sure that folks know that we do not have a show planned for next week, next 2 weeks. We will be taking off for Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. But Doug Levy will be joining us on January 7th for the Communications Golden Hour, the second edition of his book. So please make sure to join us for that. And if you do have to leave early, we definitely hope you have a good holiday season. If you have breaks from school and work, we hope you enjoy it. So we're looking at the paper. We had gone through the Supreme Court dismantling of Roe v. Wade. And we get into the rest of the A book. I'm going to jump through this because in addition to those weighty discussions, Walter, we also have Puzzle Mania. So let's take a moment to look at Puzzle Mania real quick. You said you're a crossword puzzle person, right?
I enjoy all the word games. Any word game you put in front of me, you can distract me for hours.
All the word games. The New York Times certainly has its share. In addition to Spelling Bee, I've also played Connections recently, quite a bit. So definitely you can check those out online. But here, Puzzle Mania, a special section packed with over 25 puzzles, including $2,000 prize contests. And there's this is a key at the bottom that I wonder, the edge answers, 4 letters each, are to be entered across and down, starting at the appropriate numbers. So that might be inside. I'm not sure where that would be, or whether that's even on the front page, possibly. You have a welcome to the editor. When I was growing up and the Sunday paper was delivered, everyone in the family grabbed a different section: news, sports, comics, whatever, and we rotated the parts as we finished, which is really the ethos of this show. The idea is that we're passing sections back and forth and commenting and getting some discussion going. This system wouldn't work with Puzzle Mania, the Times annual holiday puzzle section, which you're holding, as it takes hours or maybe days to go through. Only one person would get to see it. If you live in a household with multiple puzzle doers, which is the best kind of household, I would suggest putting Puzzle Mania aside and waiting until everyone can work on it together. Special features this year are not one, but $2,000 contests: Castle Quest, an escape room in print, by Jason Boomer, a super mega crossword. There are also puzzles from our friends at Logic Masters India, Jumbo Connections, Borderless Ken, a cryptic crossword with a twist, and lots of other challenges. Just remember to share. So there's all sorts of interesting puzzles and word games through this. There's a Made in India logic puzzle. For nearly 15 years, a group of Indian puzzle enthusiasts under the name of Logic Masters India has been conducting online competitions of Sudoku and other non-word puzzles for solvers around the world. They have a few examples here. They have a look closely. Can you identify these objects from their close-ups? And then this is the super mega crossword, and this is where, and I meant to do this earlier, it's you can't really do this justice with the overhead cam that we have. So therefore, I'm going to switch in a moment to our handheld camera and see whether we can make that work. So let's see what we have here. There we go. And we'll bring that on stage, and you see that coming up slowly but surely. Hopefully we'll get that feed. We'll see whether that comes through. There we go. So let's take a look. I want to show you the full width of this paper, which is pretty incredible. So here is Puzzle Mania. The super mega puzzle is this big, 2 pages across. This is really the only way to do it justice, is to show it this way. And of course, I need 3 hands so I can manipulate the paper as well. Get that fall. But here's Castle Quest, which is really interesting. You're an apprentice word wizard going through this quest.
Wow.
Right. Here are the super mega clues. This is the right-hand part of the page, are all the clues for the super mega puzzle. And they do show the answers as well. So for folks who need to check their work, I'm going to go back and show the full front page. This is what the front page looks like of that section. Just incredible stuff.
Yes,
incredible
indeed.
Stuff.
I have some end of the show graphics for you guys if you want to see it.
You got more graphics for us, Tim?
Yeah, I will.
Let's check that out.
All right. So I was thinking about what Walter was just saying, how we're in this kind of event horizon, if you will, of change, and it's about soaking in that information. So what came to me was the idea, because I'm a sci-fi, we're both Afrofuturists. So I came up with this idea of a kind of a black hole. So you have all these images, right? These images are coming in, but then there's this funnel, there's this black hole that's soaking these images in, right? And they're being pulled in. The energy, the gravity is so strong that not even light or information can escape. right? And then, of course, we got this one here. Is that the right one? Yeah. Puzzle Mania. Hey, I had to do one for Puzzle Mania. I don't play puzzles, but you guys seem to be into them, so I said, let me do a quick puzzle Mania.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. That's a great look. I'm not done with the paper just yet. I do want to make sure that we give some shout outs. Arlene is watching from Upper Manhattan, and she says, as someone whose relatives lived on or near Sedgwick Avenue before hip hop was born. So that gives some context there. Darnice was saying, you mentioned Dr. Eddie Glaude.
Yeah.
Is it? Great individual and professor. And Mary Curtis says, thank you, Professor, for your comment. I think this is back when you were talking about Roe v. Wade. Her latest column on Roll Call takes this on. I don't think many Americans believe how fragile our system is. And unfortunately, too many want to break it. That was I think the point about we need to back away from the extremes on both sides. Our friend Rose Horowitz is watching from Connecticut. Rose, thank you very much for joining us. And I see that Rose is watching on Instagram as well. So as a reminder, we're live for the first time on Instagram, in addition to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. I am personally thrilled, and I think I can actually, let me see if I can show this without, yeah, you'll see what I'm looking at on the screen. So let's do that for a moment, because I want to do a special shout out on one of our friends watching on Instagram. So you're going to see me twice, unfortunately. Thrilled, and it's going to be a little bit disconcerting, but I think I can actually, if you can make it out, show this without. My niece Noelle Crabtree is watching. You'll see what I'm looking at on Noelle. The screen. So let's. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the end of the week in Connecticut. I want to come up for the holidays. And this is just so you know, this is the view that I have of Instagram. So you're going to see who's watching twice, and who's not. Unfortunately, but more importantly, what I think if you can make it out, show this. The fact that Noelle Crabtree just you'll see what I'm looking at. Noelle, the fact that we're getting younger people watching what we're doing, and we're going to be have a great guest later in February. Someone who's been taking the New York Times and Washington Post to TikToks. So Tim, make that an Noelle.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, you wouldn't know. There's no way you could know that. And I'll just share my fun piece about Noelle. See if I can embarrass her just a little bit. Her birthday is July 4th. Oh. Her sister's birthday was yesterday. So shout out to Reese, who was born around the holidays. But Noelle.
N-O what now?
Noelle. So love that she's watching. There we go. Let's make that big. Hi, Noelle. That's just for you. Just for you, Noelle. Danielle Rued is joining as well on Instagram. Thank you, Danielle. Some of the other comments that were coming in when we're talking about Israel and Hamas, my mom is saying it's high time for a ceasefire. A lot of animosity between different groups. A lot of innocent people are being killed. Our guests have a very good opinion about this war. Thank you, Walter. And Darnice has a behind the scenes at the halftime show, a link with Snoop, etc., Dr. Dre. Email me for the entire show behind the scenes. So she has a link to YouTube in the comments on LinkedIn. So you might want to check out our LinkedIn screen for that. Arlene's calling me a wizard, possibly for managing multiple camera angles and platforms. Thank you, Arlene. She is ordering the book right away. So thank you. Arlene loves graphic novels. And Naomi says graphic novels have an immeasurable impact on all generations, and many have been groundbreaking. And a mouse is probably just the best example of that. So let's go back to the paper. It is now 10 o'clock, and we're hoping that no one's going to turn into a pumpkin. Walter and Tim, if I can maybe get 15 minutes from you, that would be great. And for our audience, if you hang around, hopefully you'll stay with us for some interesting commentary, because I know there were some articles that we saw when we reviewed the paper that we wanted to get back to. And as a reminder for folks, if you joined us late, as soon as we're done, you'll be able to watch the show from the very beginning on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. And with a little extra time, I'll be adding it to my Instagram account. There's a few other steps I need to do to make sure the video is available for folks, but in just a little bit after the show, I will make that available as well. So let's skip over arts and leisure. Let's dive right into this Sunday opinion piece. The campus speech uproar highlights differences in how Black and Jewish students are treated. This is a piece by John McWhorter. And in true read-along style, I have not read the piece yet. Sometimes when we get features, I'll study up and kind of understand what we're looking at. But this piece is the one on the bottom. Training people to think they are weak is a form of abuse. University leaders seem to assume that Black students can't handle discomfort. I think this is the context, coming out of the hearings that we had and what was going on at Penn was the question of hate speech directed toward Jews was being treated differently than hate speech historically has been treated toward Blacks. Walter, any initial thoughts on that, knowing that you haven't read
this
the
has
piece?
become a genre of popular writing in opinion sections. McWhorter offers a straw premise that is not actually what people are engaged in, and then moves to argue against it and then drive a political wedge between Jewish communities and Black communities, which again goes back many decades. And so this is a political project, and it's designed to accomplish some really conservative ends to undermine a lot of the civil rights work that came out of the 1950s and 60s. And so this piece, it's just important to call out and to recognize when people offer a false premise, and then how they can then try to twist that false premise towards an outcome that actually perpetuates the kind of problem they initially described. And so in this case, no one is treating Black or Jewish students as weak in higher education. We want a conversation. We want a series of engagements where people learn. And everybody comes from a different place in terms of where they're learning. But when we deny the history and the current practices of white supremacy and how that affects lots of different people, when we ignore patriarchy and homophobia, the ways that these things are hurting young people in particular, that's giving us a false basis to start the conversation, and it's moving to silence the people who actually have a chance to build a more inclusive and stronger society. And so that's my main take. Mr. McWhorter is someone who's been engaged in this work at least for a decade and a half, and so we need to recognize he has an agenda before he ever says the first word. And it's never really to create a stronger, more inclusive society. It's more to kind of defend the prerogatives of the very wealthy and powerful.
And I think that's an important point, Walter, because when we look at the an article like this and we just see the headline and we see the pull quote, and I didn't have a chance to read the identifier, but John McWhorter, an opinion writer, an associate professor of linguistics at Columbia University, and the author of Woke Racism. Now, if they hadn't included the author of Woke Racism, it may not have raised any red flags for me in terms of where this person is coming from, what their background is. And I learned a long time ago, at Wesleyan in particular, knowing the background, knowing the ideology of the person who's writing frames everything that they do. If you're reading someone who's a Marxist historian, it explains how they're seeing the world and what they're talking about. Unfortunately, the New York Times opinion pages doesn't come with red and blue stickers to clearly identify where people are. And then it's not a binary, right? There's a spectrum. You talked about people on the extremes, but it almost speaks to like you need an annotated version of the opinion section I'm not questioning the news. I do believe that there is, generally speaking, that that opinions are not necessarily in the news section. That's a whole different story if you want to go into that discussion. But in the opinion section, where you expect to see opinions, um, you don't know where these people are coming from unless you have that background.
And I'll say the fact that we do a read along, what I've loved about read along since the first time I ever saw one, is that you're actually getting to talk with and interact with people who are not engaged in these kinds of large scale political campaigns to shape opinion. They're thinking for themselves and sorting through whatever facts they come across. And very rarely are they at one extreme or another. They're trying to make sense of their world and their lives and make the best possible choices for themselves. That's why this space that you and Sri curate is absolutely vital. And I believe it's the future of what makes news worthwhile, what makes public discourse possible. It's just a completely invaluable, priceless piece of public discourse.
Thank you, Walter. I'm going to get you on camera later, recording just that with your head, your face big on the screen. What a great testimonial to the work that we're doing, Tim.
I have to say this. So, I'm listening intently to what you guys are saying, and I'm hearing about the conflicts. And part of what I do, I mean, what do we call this? Well, my twin brother and I call it blogging. It's journalism with graphics. So when Walter is giving information, I'm responding to what he's saying. So here in this thing, I'm responding to what both of you guys are saying, but also responding to what you're reading from the Times. So it's hit me about how important it was that you have this conflict going on between two different things. So I want to do something that's a little morbid here. So it starts out the black and white. You got the yin and yang, you got the deaf, but then it turns into a heart. We're trying to pull people together in their hearts. That was my thought. It's like you can do things like that. You can take graphics, and you can take two opposing views and distill them down to what Walter called the middle.
Absolutely.
The beautiful red beating middle.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm hoping that we can continue to do.
I want to get Arlene's comment on there when we have the paper. She said that I read the piece and thought the argument wasn't strong enough and was muddled. So appreciate you having read the piece, Arlene. Again, as a reminder for the read along, we're looking at the headline, and if we can find the nut graph real quickly, using it as a jumping off point for conversation. If someone like Walter has more context and more understanding of the author or the piece, we could get that in-depth discussion. As you saw earlier, I looked at the piece about India and the app for women who are pregnant. It's something about trying to inculcate Hindu culture and patriotism in the womb, from what I gathered, just quickly. But I reserved judgment because I hadn't read the full piece. And that's one of the things that we try and do. We try and find that balance between jumping into a conversation and holding back when we need to. I do want to get to at least one other article before we close out the show. And then there are some comments about the graphic history of hip hop that we'll close with. So thanks for staying with us. This is, we're going a little past our 10 o'clock hour, but hopefully folks will indulge us for just a little bit longer. This is an interesting piece as well, why anti-Chinese land laws are on the rise. DeSantis barred China from buying land in Florida. How did we get here? Which is an incredible concept. And they offer this picture. This is another Columbia professor, a professor of Columbia, a professor at Columbia University and the author of The Chinese Question, The Gold Rushes and Global Politics. But this image is presented without context. It's clearly some officials with someone who looks like to be of Chinese descent from the maybe 40s or 30s. Not sure what that would be. But that's on the opinion section. What I want to jump to before we really run out of time, there was Sunday Business and Styles and the book review. and I'm going to put these aside so they're out of the shot. The New York Times Magazine, Walter. This article, the failed promise of police body cameras. They were supposed to bring about a revolution in accountability. What went wrong? As we look for the article, what are your thoughts on police body cameras?
Yeah, so this is one of the first interventions that came out of the Black Lives Matter movement, in the middle of the 2010s. And, all of it was flawed. Like, there's a systemic, deep-rooted issue in the culture of law enforcement and criminal justice about looking at people and making a judgment about their public danger based on very superficial characteristics. And so as long as there's that deep rooted culture and frankly, training of law enforcement officers to be fearful, to assume that they can be killed at any moment, there's not the same level of engagement to bring in, nonviolent options for resolving a difficult legal situation. These kinds of measures that are largely designed to just sell new technology that may or may not be effective, that you're never going to get to the root just trying to kind of put a Band-Aid on a cancer. And so that's my problem. Like, I feel optimism. I want people to take hope from the way we can intervene. But when you just leave people at their own whim to turn on and turn off these cameras whenever they feel like it, that is not the way surveillance works for the general public. When you look at a place like New York City, you're always on camera and you're always going to be held accountable for what you're caught on camera doing. It's not that everybody's wearing a body cam that they can turn on and off for themselves. There's a really good movie about this a couple years ago called Anon, ANON. That was about the future of surveillance technology. And that is a way of saying, okay, how do we change our approach and really reduce the reliance on surveillance and criminal justice to kind of police each other? It requires more from all of us and less from state authority.
The cover, the start of the story, which I think is really interesting the way they laid it out. U.S. taxpayers spent millions to fund what was supposed to be a revolution in accountability. What went wrong? The title, "A Failed Promise of Police Body Cameras" by Eric Umansky, but it shows these 9 images of it looks like a a police action in someone's apartment going through the door. You see these kind of images out of context, but then they also showed 4 images of just black, of nothing captured, which is interesting. And they showed so this, I guess, their individual stories. When Barbara and Belvette Richards learned that the police had killed their son, they couldn't understand it. How on that September day in 2017, well before George Floyd and this move toward body cameras, but 2017, remind me, Philando Castile, Walter?
Oh,
Was that
17. I'd have to check back. I think Castile might have been the same year as Floyd, but no, you go back. I think I go back to Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown is 2014, 2015.
2014? Sure. How did their youngest son come to be shot in his own apartment by officers from the New York City Police Department? And then they have portraits here. This Ruth Lowenkron has fought the New York Police Department for years for access to body camera footage. Of one video she received, she says it was a horror movie. Nicole Napolitano, as director of the Police and Advocacy at Civilian Complaint Review Board, argued for a law that would take away the New York Police Department's sole control over camera footage. She was let go in November 2020. So it's showing the long history, the fight over body camera footage. This pull quote, "The way to true reform is through using body cams as an early warning system, as a way to correct small mistakes before they become big mistakes." So that's the body camera story in the New York Times Magazine today. Certainly encourage folks to check that out. As we look to bring this show to a close, I want to bring in some of the comments that have come in. We mentioned Arlene said that she was ordering the book. And again, you can find the link to the graphic novel and a PDF of the New York City edition, which is a thinner edition, on our website. Diana had an interesting comment. I'm going to take the ticker off so I'm not hiding Walter's face. She had one child start to read at 18 months and one that showed no interest even at 6 years old. It was graphic novels that was a game changer and made her wish to read. She learned to read with graphic novels at a later age than most. Now she's reading at grade level and loving it. Graphic novels saved my kid in many ways. I will gladly put you in touch, Diana. Walter may want to use that as a testimonial. Walter and Tim might find ways to use those quotes in their work. And again, just to remind folks, we talked to Walter and Tim about the graphic history of hip hop, a work that they collaborated on to put hip hop into historical context and make it accessible for some of our younger folks, particularly school age folks. So we definitely appreciated the conversation with them. Our friend Rahadian is saying good morning, and we'll catch the replay later. I wish the best for the holiday season. Please stay safe and strong. Rahadian, thank you very much for tuning in just at the end. Doug says Walter's explanation of the failed training and perspective was one of the clearest explanations of the root cause of much of the problem. So well done, Walter. And that was about body cams. Jonathan says, great show. Thank you. Mary Curtis says, in North Carolina, citizens and even police have to go to court to get footage released. A current case in Charlotte shows a brutal arrest of a black woman for perhaps smoking a joint is dividing the city. And Dr. Tachi says, this was absolutely amazing. Thank you, Neil, Walter, and Tim. I can't wait to pick up the book. So we might have made a couple of sales. Again, more of the book, if you order it and purchase it, what we have on our website is just a teaser, if you will. Tim, what do you got?
Very quickly, I think about when Walter and I met each other several years ago, but he's mentioned several times about how when he decided to pick me for this project, it was during this training session with this think tank, a collaboration between the think tank called N Squared and the Black Speculative Arts Movement. And it was so amazing being around all of these really dense thinkers who were very informational. And I just was thinking when we were talking about police, just body cam stuff, one of the things that was happening during one of those events where people were talking about what needed to come about it. This is going to be so weird, but it made me think of this. This was an image I did during that session. It's called an anti-assault weapon, right? Now, I work in the entertainment industry, in entertainment design. But because I was listening to all of these Afrofuturists and scholars, it was talking about, everything would only have a taser. It would have a remote operator. Mm. So you could, as a cop, could not use your gun unless given permission. It made me think about Watchmen, the show that was.
Yeah.
So that's why this is some of the most fulfilling work for me, because I'm recognizing I'm not just doing graphics for graphics' sake. We're doing graphics that potentially, or at least when you get swarmed by kids, you begin to realize it's affecting public policy. And that is the highest form. Oh man, you're changing lives with your drawings.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to show that, and just to demonstrate why it's such a fulfilling process for me to work with Walter on this and to showcase this during the New York Times read along. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I mentioned earlier, but Tim Fielder, you can find him at Dieselfunk on Twitter and Instagram, or on his website, dieselfunk.com. Walter is on Twitter and Instagram as well, Walter D. Greason, and that's Greason. You can also find his website, waltergrayson.com. I'm going to probably mention Grayson at least 2 or 3 more times because it's not Greason, as I said throughout the last time he was on the show. And Walter said, "Don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't." No, names are important. It is important um, to honor and respect how people should be called, want to be called, um, and a simple thing is getting a pronunciation right. Is especially for someone who has been such a close friend for so long, a close collaborator. Walter, I'm not going to apologize for all the times I mispronounced your name. I'm just going to keep pronouncing your name correctly, so that everyone hears what it is. Um,
I appreciate you, man. Always.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, a couple of the last few comments. Darnice saying happy holidays, awesome show. My mom saying great guests and very good show. Um, Miriam, the show just got better and better. So thank you, Miriam. And Doug is responding to, I think, something what Tim was saying. That's why many of us got into journalism, that ability to make a difference. And Arlene says she just put herself on the ordering list for the graphic novel.
Thank you.
A couple of quick announcements that I failed to share earlier. Big shout out to our sponsor, Muckrack. They've been supporting SRI's shows for a number of years, not just the read along, but other projects that we've done. And of course, want to make sure that folks know that this is a production of Digimentors, the consulting firm that Sri and his friend Andrew Lee started many years ago. That I was proud to join as a um, uh, vice president of events and communications. Um, it's something that started during the pandemic. We produced a conference, and things went really well. And we had a number of people asking us to produce events for them, so I joined full time, leaving my job at United Way. We've evolved into doing digital marketing events and programs like this, but helping with strategic communications, trainings, workshops, staffing, and recruiting. And recently we've done a lot, gone back to our roots effectively, helping to amplify events. I was in Boston this week for a conference sponsored by the CDO Club, and we took over their CEO's LinkedIn account, and I did live LinkedIn posts throughout the conference, which had an incredible impact. And Sri has been doing AI workshops as well. His new workshop, The Non-Scary Practical Guide to Generative AI. So if you're interested in that, drop a note, reach out. You can go to the website, digimentors.group/SriAI to learn more. And that's something that we can certainly talk about. Walter and Tim, I know we've talked about AI together. This is something, Walter, we maybe can offer to other faculty members at Macalester or other groups that you know of, just so that people can understand what the tools are that are available and how they can be used. And these workshops can be customized based on the audience, based on the time
We just
that we
had our
have.
first meeting to generate a center for ethical use of artificial intelligence. So yes, we will be reaching out to talk more.
Let's definitely talk about that. That's a big focus of Sri's work is the appropriate use, the ethical use of these AI tools. And I know, Tim, you use AI in your artwork,
Yes, I
right?
do. Yes, I do. It is something that, and we can't describe what we're doing in 15 seconds, but it liberates me as an artist how I use it to be able to produce high fidelity, detailed work much more quickly. And it is a game changer. It's not going anywhere. Of course, there are ethical and policy issues to work out, but the world has changed, and we will not be living in a world without AI moving forward.
That's great. I want to give another shout out on Instagram. Again, as folks know, we're live on Instagram for the first time, and we can see who's watching. Adam Nagorny, who was our guest on an incredible show a couple of weeks ago, and we see that circled because it was a special 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time show. He's the author of The Times: How the Newspaper of Record Survived Scandal, Scorn, and the Transformation of Journalism. Adam checked in on Instagram. So, Adam, thank you. And for folks who are watching, as a reminder, if you joined us late, you can catch the show from the beginning. As soon as we finish, it'll take a few minutes to reset, and you can watch on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. I'll need an extra few minutes, maybe 15, 20 minutes or so, to make it available on my Instagram. We're live on Instagram, but the way Instagram works, you have to take save the file and upload it and blah, 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 so that it's on your feed. But it will be there for folks to watch when they're ready. And we'll close with Mary Curtis saying the coolest show ever. And Jonathan endorsing the workshop that we did in New York, the AI workshop back November 9th. It was a great workshop, and it continues to be. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for this last show of 2023. After this show, we're going to take a few weeks off, December 24th and 31st. That's a future picture of my feet up on the coffee table, relaxing. And we will be back January 7th with Doug Levy, author of The Communications Golden Hour. You can find him on Twitter at SFDoug and on Instagram at DougLevyNY. So thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate you giving us the extra time today, everyone that stayed on and watched. We held most of our audience, which is really incredible, even though we usually finish at 10 a.m. Eastern. Walter, Tim, thank you for making my Sunday morning a real treat. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Everyone take care, and we look forward to catching up later. Bye-bye.